They say the human mind is like a mirror. Once it's shattered, you can glue the pieces back together, but the reflection will never be the same. For 3 years, I lived in the cracks. I was Maya Morrison, a woman who designed logos for organic tea brands and stayed up late worrying about her brother's temper. I was a girl who jumped at thunder and felt a strange, phantom ache in her ring finger whenever the moon was full. But the mirror was a lie. The man chasing me through the rain wasn't a brother protecting his kin. He was a gardener tending to a crop he meant to harvest. He didn't want my love. He wanted the ghost. He wanted the woman who could bypass a biometric vault in 60 seconds and disappear into the night like a whisper. He wanted the ledger I'd buried in the graveyard of my own subconscious. I thought I was running toward safety when I saw the neon pulse of the Onyx Lounge. I thought the gold-trimmed doors were the finish line of a marathon that had lasted 3 states and 1,000 nightmares. I didn't realize that I wasn't escaping a predator. I was being returned to my owner. The stalker behind me was the storm, loud, chaotic, and terrifying. But the man waiting inside, the man with the dragon on his neck and the eyes of a king, he was the abyss. And the moment I stepped into his light, I realized the abyss didn't want to swallow me. It wanted to crown me. I saw the neon glow of the Onyx Lounge ahead, a fortress of gold and shadow amidst the grey downpour. I burst through the heavy oak doors, desperate for a witness, for light, for any scrap of sanctuary. I expected the warmth of a crowd and the safety of public eyes. Instead, the air inside was stiller and deadlier than the storm I'd just escaped. The music didn't stop, but the conversation died instantly. The atmosphere was thick with the scent of expensive bourbon and cold, sharp steel. Men in tailored, dark suits turned as one. They didn't look at me with pity or the confusion one might offer a drenched, trembling woman. They looked at me with a terrifying, silent reverence, their bodies tensing as if awaiting a command. My instinct to keep running died in my throat. I looked back at the glass doors, seeing the silhouette of Elias pausing under the street lamp. He didn't come inside. He simply watched, a ghost in the rain, with a smirk that told me he'd delivered me exactly where I was meant to go. I turned back to the room, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. At the center of the lounge sat a man whose presence felt like a physical weight, pinning me to the floor. He didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't even move. He simply set down a glass of amber liquid, the ice clinking with a finality that sounded like a cell door locking. His eyes, dark and predatory, held 1,000 secrets I couldn't remember, yet my skin hummed with a sudden, violent recognition. "You're late, Maya," he said. His voice was a low, melodic growl that vibrated in my very marrow, a sound more familiar to my soul than my own name. Or should I say, "Welcome home, Mrs. Kim." In that moment, the terror of the man outside faded, replaced by the suffocating realization that I hadn't run into a sanctuary. I had run into a cage that had been waiting 3 years for me to return. The silence in the Onyx Lounge was a physical weight, heavier than the soaked fabric of my coat. I stood paralyzed in the entryway, the water dripping from my hair sounding like hammer blows against the polished floor. The man behind the amber glass didn't move, yet the air seemed to bend toward him, charged with a magnetic, lethal gravity. He was beautiful in a way that felt like a warning, sharp jawline, dark hair swept back with careless precision, and eyes that didn't just see me, they catalogued me. "Who are you?" My voice was a brittle shadow of itself. I glanced back at the door. Elias was gone, faded into the deluge, leaving me in the hands of a man who looked like he owned the very concept of power. "You know who I am, Maya," he said, rising from his leather seat. He moved with a predatory grace, closing the distance between us until I was forced to tilt my head back to meet his gaze. He smelled of sandalwood and wood smoke, a scent that hit my brain like a lightning strike, triggering a jagged, painful pulse behind my eyes. Even if you've spent 3 years trying to convince yourself otherwise. He reached out, his fingers grazing my jaw. I should have flinched, should have bolted, but my body felt anchored to the spot. It wasn't just fear, it was a treacherous, deep-seated heat that rose to meet his touch. He gently turned my head to the side, his thumb brushing the sensitive skin just below my left ear. "Elias told you this was a birthmark, didn't he?" he murmured, his breath warm against my temple. "Another lie in a life built on them." He signaled to a mirrored pillar nearby. Shivering, I looked at my reflection. Under the harsh, golden light of the lounge, his fingers pulled back a lock of my wet hair to reveal a small, intricate ink marking I had always believed was a dark, irregular mole. It wasn't a mole. It was a tiny, coiled dragon, its tail wrapping around a microscopic stylized K. The ink was so fine it looked like it was woven into my very pores. "It's a brand, Maya." "My brand," he whispered, his eyes locking onto mine in the mirror. "You didn't just stumble in here. You came home. My name is Kim Woo-jin, and 3 years ago, before you chose to forget everything, you were the woman who wore my ring and shared my bed." He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a heavy gold band, placing it on the marble bar top between us. The K on the ring matched the K on my neck perfectly. The world tilted. The graphic designer from Portland, the girl with the overprotective brother, she was evaporating, leaving behind a stranger who recognized the touch of a mafia king. "Now," Woo-jin said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, possessive silk. "Shall we talk about why you let a snake like Elias keep you from me for so long? Would you like me to continue with Chapter 3? Before I do, kindly hit the subscribe button. Turn on your notification to get notified when next we drop a video like this. Also, like, share and drop a comment, thank you." The heavy oak doors of the lounge burst open, but it wasn't a rescue. 2 of Woo-jin's men dragged a struggling Elias into the center of the room, his face bruised and his composure shattered. He didn't look like the protective brother who had held my hand through my darkest nightmares. He looked like a cornered animal. I stepped toward him, my heart a chaotic mess of grief and fury, but Woo-jin's hand on my shoulder was a cold, grounding weight. "Maya, thank God," Elias gasped, his eyes darting toward me. "These people, they're monsters. You have to get out of here." "Enough." Woo-jin's voice sliced through the air like a blade. He didn't look at Elias, he looked at me. "He is not your brother, Maya. He is a cleaner for the Choi clan. His job wasn't to protect you. It was to monitor the vessel until the contents could be harvested." Woo-jin signaled to the bartender, who placed a sleek, silver recorder on the marble surface. With a click, the room filled with a voice that stole the air from my lungs. It was my voice, but it lacked the tremor of the woman I was now. This voice was steady, frigid, and laced with a terrifying authority. "If you're hearing this, Maya, then the fail-safe worked," my own voice echoed, sounding like a message from the grave. "You don't remember Kim Woo-jin, and you don't remember the ghost. That was the price of his life." I had to erase the map to the ledger from my mind to keep the council from torturing it out of me. But listen closely. The man who calls himself Elias is the serpent in the garden. He was sent by the syndicate to steer you back to them once the memory wipe stabilized. He isn't family. He is the cage. I looked at Elias, and for the first time, I saw through the mask. The warmth in his eyes had turned into a flat, clinical detachment. He stopped struggling against his captors and spat on the floor. 3 years, he sneered, his voice dropping the fraternal facade. 3 years I played house with a broken assassin, waiting for a single slip, a single memory of where you hid that evidence. You were always so easy to manipulate when you were scared, ghost. The world tilted on its axis. Every memory of Elias, the shared meals, the whispered comfort, the frantic escapes, was a calculated performance. I wasn't a graphic designer from Portland. I was a weapon that had been stolen and gaslit into submission. I turned away from the man I had called brother and looked at the mafia boss who claimed to be my husband. The fear was still there, but beneath it, a dark, dormant instinct began to pulse in time with the dragon tattoo on my neck. The ghost wasn't dead. She was just waiting for the lie to end. The transition from the rain-slick streets to Woo Jin's penthouse was a blur of tinted glass and silent elevators. When the doors finally slid open, I wasn't met with the cold, sterile environment of a criminal's lair. Instead, the air was warm, smelling of cedar and expensive paper, wrapping around me like a memory I couldn't quite grasp. The penthouse was a fortress in the sky, a glass-walled sanctuary overlooking a city that looked like a carpet of fallen stars. Woo Jin led me through the expansive living space with a quiet, watchful intensity. He didn't treat me like a prisoner, yet the way he stood between me and the exit reminded me that the cage was still a cage, no matter how much gold leaf covered the bars. "You lived here for 2 years, Maya," he said, his voice echoing softly against the marble. "This wasn't just my home. It was yours." He stopped before a set of heavy, dark wood doors at the end of a long corridor. With a slow, deliberate motion, he pushed them open. "You said you were a graphic designer in Portland. But you've always been an artist of a different kind." I stepped into the room and felt the breath leave my body. It was an art studio, bathed in the soft glow of recessed lighting. Canvases were stacked against the walls, but it was the drafting table in the center that drew me forward. Scattered across it were dozens of charcoal sketches, their edges curled with age. I picked one up, my fingers trembling. It was a portrait of Woo Jin. It wasn't the hard, lethal man I had seen in the bar. This version of him was soft, his head tilted back in a laugh, eyes crinkled at the corners. I shuffled through the others. There were sketches of his hands, of the dragon tattoo on his neck, of the view from this very window. Every stroke was intimate, filled with a raw, aching devotion that I couldn't reconcile with the fear currently pulsing in my veins. My eyes landed on a sketchbook tucked into a corner of the desk. I opened it to a random page and saw a drawing of a small child, a boy with Woo Jin's defiant brow and a smile that felt like a punch to my heart. Underneath the sketch, in my own unmistakable handwriting, was a single word, Jiho. The charcoal stained my fingertips, a physical tether to a past I had tried to burn away. I looked at Woo Jin, who was standing in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the moonlight. He wasn't just a stranger claiming to be my husband. He was the subject of every line I had ever drawn. The ghost hadn't just been a thief, she had been a woman deeply, dangerously in love, and as I stared at the sketches, I realized the most terrifying part wasn't the life I'd forgotten. It was how much I wanted it back. Woo Jin stepped into the room, his presence pulling the oxygen from the air. He didn't look at the sketches. His eyes were fixed on me, mourning a version of me I couldn't find. He took the sketchbook from my trembling hands and laid it flat, his fingers lingering on the drawing of the boy. "You weren't just an artist, Maya. You were the shadow the world couldn't catch," he began, his voice dropping into a low, somber resonance. "They called you the ghost because you could walk through a high-security vault like it was a morning mist. You were the best thief the syndicates ever employed, and for a long time, you were the only thing that kept me human in a world designed to turn me into a monster." I looked at my hands, horrified. They felt too soft to be the tools of a criminal, yet the callus on my fingertips whispered a different story. 3 years ago, Woo Jin continued, moving closer until I could feel the heat radiating from his chest. My father committed the ultimate sin. He betrayed the council, selling out our own families to rival clans for a seat at a table that didn't exist. You found the evidence, the ledger. It contained names, bank accounts, and the locations of every safe house in the country. If the council found out you had it, they would have dismantled your mind to find it. And if they found out I was helping you hide it, they would have executed us both. He reached out, his thumb tracing the dragon tattoo on my neck with a reverence that made my breath hitch. The Choi clan sent their best trackers after you. You realized that as long as you knew where the ledger was, you were a walking death sentence to everyone you loved. You came to me with a vial of a neuroinhibitor and a plan. You chose to forget, Maya. You erased your own soul to hide the map, trusting that your body would lead you back to me when the time was right. And Elias? I whispered, the name tasting like ash. Elias was the variable we didn't account for. Wu Jin's eyes darkened with a cold, murderous promise. He was a sleeper agent, a man the council planted in your path the moment your memory failed. He spent 3 years rewriting your history, making you believe you were a victim so he could watch for the moment your instincts flickered back to life. You weren't running from a stalker, Maya. You were running from a jailer who was waiting for the ghost to wake up and tell him where the bodies were buried. I looked back at the sketches, the lines of Wu Jin's face blurring as tears finally spilled over. I hadn't just lost my memories. I had surrendered my very self to save a man who now looked at me like I was the most precious thing in a broken world. The truth was a jagged blade, and as it cut through the last of my lies, I felt the first cold, sharp spark of the ghost stirring in the dark. The calm of the penthouse was shattered not by a sound, but by a sudden, unnatural flicker of the lights. Wu Jin froze, his hand dropping from my neck to the small of my back in a motion so swift it was almost a blur. I didn't have time to ask what was happening before the floor-to-ceiling glass of the art studio exploded inward. The air turned into a whirlwind of crystalline shards. 2 figures in tactical gear swung in on repelling lines, silhouetted against the city lights like vengeful spirits. My heart jumped into my throat, but then something strange happened. The panic didn't paralyze me. It transformed. A cold, electric current surged through my limbs, and the world slowed down into a series of tactical vectors. Wu Jin reached for the firearm tucked into his waistband, but a third assassin, having breached through a side vent, leveled a silenced submachine gun at his chest. My body moved before my mind could register the threat. I didn't think about the physics of the movement. I simply executed it. I swept a heavy oak chair across the floor, catching the third assassin at the knees. As he stumbled, I was already on him. My hands, which had felt so soft moments ago, moved with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. I drove the heel of my palm into his chin, snapping his head back, and with a fluid twist, I disarmed him. The weight of the weapon felt right in my grip, not like a foreign object, but like an extension of my own arm. Wu Jin ducked behind the drafting table, firing a precise shot that took down one of the men on the ropes, but the second one landed and lunged at him with a combat knife. I didn't hesitate. I vaulted over the table, my movements a terrifying display of liquid death. I caught the assassin's wrist midair, the bone snapping under my grip with a sickening pop. I spun him around, using his own momentum to drive him face-first into the marble edge of the table. He crumpled, unconscious or dead before he hit the floor. Silence returned to the room, punctuated only by the wind whistling through the shattered glass and the heavy thrum of my own pulse. I stood over the fallen man, the stolen weapon held in a perfect low-ready position. My breathing was shallow, my eyes scanning the shadows for the next threat with a clinical detachment that horrified the Maya I had been for 3 years. Wu Jin stood up slowly, his gaze moving from the bodies on the floor to me. There was no shock in his expression, only a dark, somber pride. I looked down at my hands, watching them tremble now that the adrenaline was fading. I hadn't just defended him, I had hunted. The ghost didn't just walk through walls, Maya, Wu Jin whispered, stepping over the debris to reach me. She eliminated anyone who tried to stop her. The weapon felt heavy now, a leaden weight in my palm. I wasn't just a graphic designer anymore, and I wasn't just a victim. I was a wraith who had found her blade. The adrenaline from the fight still buzzed in my fingertips, a cold, electric hum that refused to settle. I stood amidst the shattered glass of the penthouse, looking at the man I had just defended with lethal, instinctive precision. Wu Jin didn't speak. He simply walked toward the drafting table and picked up the sketchbook I had dropped during the breach. He flipped to the page with the boy, the one with the defiant brow and the hauntingly familiar smile. "We don't have time for the slow return of your memory, Maya," he said, his voice tight with an urgency that made my blood run cold. "They didn't just come for the ledger. They came for the leverage." "Jiho," I whispered, the name vibrating in my chest like a struck chord. "Who is he, Wu Jin? Truly?" Wu Jin looked at the drawing, his expression softening into something raw and vulnerable. "He is 3 years old. He has your eyes and my temper. When you decided to undergo the wipe, we knew the council would search every inch of my life to find a weakness. So, we did the unthinkable. We hid him before you forgot he existed. You chose to lose him so that they could never find him through you." A sudden, sharp memory pierced my mind, not a visual, but a feeling. The weight of a small, warm body against my chest. The scent of baby powder and rain. The agonizing wrench of walking away from a nursery while my own mind began to unravel. I gasped, clutching the edge of the table as the phantom sensation of a child's hand gripping my finger flickered through my consciousness. "Where is he?" I demanded, the ghost in me rising to the surface with a mother's ferocity. "He's been at a sanctuary in the valley, overseen by a woman you trusted above all others. But Elias, he didn't just watch you, Maya. He was a bloodhound. He's been intercepting the encrypted reports I've been sending to the safe house. He knows exactly where Jiho is." As if on cue, the tablet on the desk chimed. A grainy, high-angle photo appeared on the screen. A small boy in a blue jacket, sitting on a swing set, unaware of the red laser dot dancing across his shoulder. Below it, a text from an unknown number. The ledger for the boy. "You have 1 hour." The world tilted. The graphic designer who was afraid of her own shadow died in that moment. I reached for the tactical vest of the fallen assassin at my feet, stripping him of his spare magazines with a practiced efficiency that no longer felt foreign. "He's my son," I said, my voice as flat and hard as the steel in my hand. "And they have no idea what I'm capable of when someone touches what is mine." Wu Jin didn't try to stop me. He simply checked his own weapon and met my gaze with a dark, predatory understanding. "Then let's go get our boy." The safe house was a low-slung stone cottage tucked into the throat of the valley, but through the thermal scope of the rifle Wu Jin had handed me, it looked like a tomb. My pulse, once a frantic drumming, had settled into the rhythmic, icy thrum of a machine. The Maya who designed logos and feared the rain was gone. In her place stood the wraith, and she was hungry. 3 on the perimeter. 2 at the door. "Elias is inside with the boy," I whispered, the tactical headset crackling with Wu Jin's heavy breathing as he moved into position from the east. "On your signal, ghost," he replied. I didn't give a signal, I became the signal. I moved through the tall grass not like a woman, but like a shifting shadow, a glitch in the security cameras I had instinctively mapped out. I reached the first guard before he could draw breath, my blade finding the soft gap in his armor with a silent, terrifying familiarity. There was no hesitation, only the cold execution of a task 3 years in the making. I breached the side window as Wu Jin detonated a flashbang at the front. The world exploded in white light and chaos, but I moved through the smoke with liquid death precision. I didn't see enemies, I saw obstacles. A snap of a wrist here, a surgical strike there. I was a whirlwind of black silk and steel, reclaiming the title that had been stripped from my mind. I burst into the nursery to find Elias holding Jiho, a jagged knife pressed to the boy's trembling shoulder. The sight of my son, real, breathing, and terrified, shattered the last of my psychological barriers. The ledger, the mafia, the memory wipe, none of it mattered. "Let him go, Elias," I said, my voice vibrating with a lethal, subsonic resonance. "You don't have the guts, Maya," Elias sneered, his eyes wild. "You're just a broken girl playing dress-up." "I'm not Maya," I said, stepping into the light. "And I'm not playing." In a blur of motion, I threw the secondary blade hidden in my sleeve. It caught Elias in the shoulder, forcing him to stumble back and release the boy. Jiho scrambled toward me, but in the doorway, a surviving council assassin leveled his weapon at the child's back. Time didn't just slow, it stopped. I saw the finger tighten on the trigger. I saw Wu Jin diving from the hallway, too far to reach us. I didn't think. I didn't calculate the cost. I threw my body over Jiho, pulling his small, warm frame into the hollow of my chest. The impact was a white-hot bloom of agony in my side, a blunt force that tore the air from my lungs. I felt the wet heat of blood soaking into my shirt, but I didn't let go. I squeezed my eyes shut, shielding my son from the final, deafening crack of Wu Jin's return fire. The silence that followed was heavy and thick with the scent of gunpowder. I felt Wu Jin's frantic hands on me, his voice calling my name from a great distance. I looked down at Jiho, who was staring at me with wide, tear-filled eyes, my eyes. I had taken the hit, but for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't the one being herded. I was the shield. Would you like me to finish the story with Chapter 9, Burning the Empire, where Maya survives her wound and faces the council to secure her family's freedom? The recovery was not a period of rest, but a slow, burning transformation. The bullet had left a scar on my ribs, a jagged silver reminder of the night I stopped running and started fighting. For 6 months, the penthouse became a war room where the ghost and the graphic designer finally merged into a single, formidable entity. I didn't just remember the ledger. I understood the architecture of the power it held. The night of the syndicate council meeting, I didn't wear the camouflage of a shadow. I wore a gown of midnight silk that shimmered like oil on water, my hair swept up to expose the dragon tattoo that was no longer a hidden brand, but a royal seal. Beside me, Wu Jin stood like a storm held in check, his hand resting possessively on the small of my back as we entered the grand hall of the syndicate. The air in the room curdled with the scent of old tobacco and fear. The 12 chairs were filled with men who had spent decades playing God with other people's lives. Men who had authorized Elias to hunt me like a dog. They looked at me and saw a victim who had forgotten her place. They were wrong. I didn't wait for permission to speak. I stepped to the center of the mahogany table and placed a single encrypted drive in the center. 3 years ago, I erased my mind to protect the secrets on this disk, I said, my voice cutting through the room with a cold, regal precision. I did it to save a man I loved, and in doing so, I gave you the chance to rot from the inside out. But the ghost has a long memory, even when her mind is dark. I activated the drive, and the screens surrounding the council flickered to life. It wasn't just the ledger. It was every wire transfer, every betrayal, and every communication between the council members and the rival clans they claimed to fight. I watched the blood drain from Chairman Pak's face as his own treason was laid bare in high definition. "You hunted me to find this," I murmured, leaning over the table until I was inches from him. "Now you have it. And it will be the last thing you ever own." One by one, the corrupt were led away by Wu Jin's loyalist guards, the empire they had built on lies collapsing under the weight of the truth I had bled to protect. When the room finally cleared, leaving only the two of us in the hollow silence of the hall, Wu Jin turned to me. He didn't see the thief he had married, or the girl who had run through the rain. He saw a queen who had burned an empire to save her family. "Is it done?" he asked softly. I looked at the empty chairs, then out at the city where our son, Jiho, was finally sleeping in a world without shadows. I took Wu Jin's hand, my fingers interlacing with his. "It's just beginning," I said. "The ghost is dead. Maya Kim is here to stay."